clouds are dropping on my head, reminding me the things at night I should have laughed and said. So please forgive the words I use, my mind it tends to run away with small ideas. I know I'm not the only one, so dear. Oh.
How do you foresee that we can save some money?
Robert, I think, first of all, I want to tell you, as a fiscally conservative member of the Blue Dogs, the deficit and debt of this country is probably the #1 issue to Blue Dogs. And I remind people a lot of time, we didn't get here overnight. In the year 2000, when then President Clinton left office, he left a surplus. And the debt, they had actually bent that curve, and the debt of this country was going down. And then in the next 8 years, President Bush initiated the tax cuts. Well, let me be real frank with you. Everybody loves tax cuts. I've never had anybody come to me and say, "Would you please raise my taxes? I just don't think I'm paying enough." So everybody loves tax cuts, but there are consequences to them. The tax cuts have added $1 trillion to the national debt. And here's what happened. They lowered revenue, but increased spending, and then we're involved in 2 wars that no one wants to pay for. And you know the old adage of there's no such thing as a free lunch. We have to pay for the war, and our country should want to pay for that war. If we're going to send our young men and women over there to fight for us, we should want to pay for it. But no one has, quite frankly, so we just borrowed the money to go to war. There's a little wooden plaque on my desk that was made by a fellow in Iuka, the neighboring town to me, to my home, made out of Mississippi hardwood, and it says, "North Mississippi comes first." And I never forget that. It's not just a little symbol that I think looks cute on the desk. I see that every day. I think about it every day. And that's what I want to do, move North Mississippi forward.
Now, health care, we know that's a big issue, and some attempts have been made to derail and got some provisions. Some say we need to overhaul the entire health care program that was recently passed. What is your feeling about that?
From the very beginning, I said I realize our country there's a great need for health care reform. I was one of those that thought, had we handled this in phases or stages, if you will, that #1, the American people would have understood it better, and they would have accepted it better, instead of this massive 2,000-page bill that ultimately caused me to vote no. It was too costly, #1. It was hard to understand, and my goodness, we read and followed this thing through months and months and months, because I genuinely wanted to be supportive of health care reform. I don't think we got it right. There's some good. There are those, and I realize my opponent just says, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, that's being political and playing political games on a very serious issue. I'm willing to repeal the things that need to be worked on or changed, but some of this is good, and let's keep the good parts and fix the bad parts.
Is there any kind of abeyance or any kind of rollback that's in the future for employers having to pay that increased amount?
I would certainly look at that. Again, that's one of those issues that as soon as we get Americans back to work, I think it should be looked at. I'm willing to do that. I'm not willing to just simply say because one side says it's a good idea or bad idea, just follow that, my party or the other. I'm willing to look at that. I supported the last extension of unemployment benefits. I'm convinced that the great majority of North Mississippians do not want to draw unemployment benefits. They want to work. But until this economy turns around, I just can't run off and leave the people who are struggling.
And what kind of approach do you feel like needs to be taken with
First of all, I'm 100% against amnesty. 100%. Secondly, you mentioned the wall, and I hear a lot of questions about that. I'm really glad you mentioned it, because the first year I was in office, another member and I went on a codale to the Texas and California border. We saw the famous wall. We met with immigration agents, and we said, what needs to be done? You guys are right here on the front line. You're here where the rubber meets the road. What do we need to do? They need more modern equipment. There are places that the fence, it's just become to be known as the fence, there are places that it's working great. I saw it. There's no way a torch is going to cut through it. It's strong. But there are areas that the fence is not the answer. They need more officers. They need help. I'm proud to have voted to send more National Guard troops to the border. I think it was 15,000 we voted to send down there. I have voted and supported for to have ICE immigration agents here in North Mississippi. The first thing we need to do, though, completely, is to secure our borders. We need to secure them. I don't think we've done that. And then we need to enforce the laws that we already have on the books. That's a great start to a serious problem. It is a problem, and I think you'll see addressed more as this economy turns around and gets the focus off of that. I've been very clear about the tax cuts. I said, let's leave the tax cuts in place for one more year. And I realize it would be easy for someone then to be critical and say, well, you just said they added to the debt. They do. But we have to turn this recession around. We have to get Americans, and specifically Mississippians, in my case that I'm interested in, back to work. But Robert, when Mississippians and Americans are working, they're participating in the process. They're contributing back. Once we get out of this recession, and we will get out of it, we have to get serious about this debt. It is unsustainable, it's growing out of control, and it must stop, and tough choices will have to be made.
Do you still feel like that the Economic Recovery Act has worked? What aspects of it were successful? What are some that were not? And how would you like to, I guess, respond to those folks who say that it didn't work?
Well, it is still working, quite frankly, and I want to remind you too that almost 40% of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act was actually a tax cut for the middle class, for the working people of this country, that affected 98%, almost 99% of the people in Mississippi by the Making Work Pay tax credit, by the tuition college credit. A family could receive, or an individual, up to $2,500 tax credit, not deduction, but tax credit. I've had many people that have come up to me and said, for the first time ever, I was able to deduct my child's college tuition. So those were good things. You don't have to go very far to see the big green signs from Mississippi Department of Transportation, to see the improvements that were made to roads and bridges across the district. Quite frankly, I've said this before, I was somewhat critical. I would love to have seen more of it in infrastructure. I would like to have seen it a sort of copy of what happened with Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, and the interstate system. That's what I would like to have seen. You know, but again, I'm only one vote. And it's easy for those, and I'll tell you, I think I took a lot of hypocritical criticism from specifically my opponent, who's never said how he would have balanced the budget in the state of Mississippi if it had not been for those recovery monies. He criticized me for voting for it, but yet took those hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars and balanced the budget. But when asked, what would you have cut if you hadn't received that money? He won't answer that. So, you know, again, I don't accept that hypocritical. I accept the criticism if someone was opposed to it, but not from folks who took hundreds of millions of dollars and balanced the state budget. I just do not accept that criticism. I believe that education is the pathway to jobs, and a better education is the pathway to better jobs. And I believe that just as strongly. I'm a product of public education, Prentice County School System, Northeast Mississippi Community College for 2 years, and then Ole Miss, University of Mississippi for 2 years. I'm a product of the best we have to offer. I may be the biggest cheerleader in the state of Mississippi for the Mississippi Community College system.